What's up, guys? I'm EJ, and I'm joined by Kendall, and thank you so much, and welcome to our virtual NBA Draft War Room. This is a new series we have on New Generation Media where we'll be breaking down NBA teams and their strategies heading into the 2020 NBA Draft. Obviously, as I said, Kendall joins me now, and Kendall, this is a series we've been talking about for months, and I'm really excited to get it going. What are you expecting to get into with this stuff?
Yeah, it's gonna be super fun. We're gonna be breaking down, pretty much every team in the league and what we think that how they should operate in this draft cycle. Obviously, it's gonna be a little tougher with it being virtually. Obviously, we're socially distanced doing this video, and I think that you're really gonna get a sense for where a team's needs are, how they should operate, and consider free agency as an option, but also particularly who they should target in the draft. That's what we're trying to figure out, and that's how we're trying to, we're basically consultants. We're consulting NBA teams on what they should do. So hopefully, for this video, the New York Knicks, Leon Rose, William Wesley, and his group, Walt Perrin, they're watching this video so we can kind of guide them in the right direction. Obviously, EJ, huge Knicks fan, so I'm a Celtics fan, but I have this little Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah, I saw you bring that, and I'm like, why is that in the building? How did that get there? That should have been in the trash compactor years ago.
I always keep it just to remind myself the good old days. But no, yeah, this is going to be very interesting because the Knicks have a lot of different options. So you could break it down, EJ.
Yeah, so as Kendall said, I hope that the conversations we'll have in this series will kind of simulate some of the conversations you may actually see in the NBA Draft War Room as these teams prepare for the NBA Draft. So let's start again with the New York Knicks. It's the fitting team to be the first team we do, considering that is my team, and it's a team that a lot of people are paying attention to in this upcoming draft. The Knicks finished with a 21-45 record. They now own picks number 8, 27, and 38 in this upcoming draft. A lot of flux in regards to what can happen with the roster. The Knicks are expected to have the second most cap room this free agency. The free agents that they have coming up this year include Mo Harkless, and then a bunch of player options. You got Todd Gibson with a $10 million player option. Bobby Portis is a $15 million player option. Wayne Ellington has an $8 million player option. And even Theo Pinson, who a lot of people may feel like Theo Pinson isn't on the Nets. He actually was acquired by the Knicks even when they weren't in the bubble during a weird situation in terms of trying to create cap space and them getting rid of Alonzo Trier. Pinson also has a player option. He hasn't played a game for the Knicks. And then Damian Dotson as well is a free agent. I don't know how you feel about this offseason, Kendall, but Knicks are in a weird predicament. They come in with the potential for a lot of cap room, but also really a lot of holes. And I'm not sure with this class not really being all that deep, if they can fill all of them through free agency, why the draft is going to be really important.
The Knicks are the embodiment of the draft ideology of pick the best player available. Because besides center, I think center, obviously you feel you have Mitchell Robinson at that 5 spot. So I think you feel comfortable that a guy like James Wiseman, even Onyeka Okongwu, if he's available at 8, you're probably not going to look at later in the draft. You want to look at other bigs that can maybe support Mitchell Robinson in the front court, maybe play the 4 or the 5. I think that makes sense, but primarily, I think you're looking at positions 1 through 4 for the Knicks, and they're pretty much holes everywhere. R.J. Barrett is a guy that could play 1, 2, 3. So I think that this is the best player available to pick for the Knicks, I would think.
In some ways, yes. The Knicks are in a weird position with this draft because I think that this is a team that clearly, when you look at biggest needs, primary ball handler, primary kind of scoring option from the perimeter is vital. The Knicks have the point guard situation and lead guard situation has been a nightmare. It feels like forever. It feels like since
Marbury.
I was gonna say, well, you can make that case. I was gonna say Jeremy Lin, I think, was the last time any Knicks fans felt really good about the future of that position, and that was very short lived. I can't remember. And after that, Felton did a decent job for a little bit, but I don't think anyone felt great about that position moving forward for a long time. The Knicks still are in that position. But the problem is, obviously, a guy like LaMelo Ball you would want, potentially, you're not going to be able to get an 8 unless you trade up the moon, trade everything up, potentially, maybe to get to that spot. So you're in a weird position where there are guards that Knicks can have. Some of them may not be ready to be drafted at 8, so do you move down? There are some guys that maybe could slide potentially, given how the draft order went. So maybe you'll get lucky. So point guard's gonna be a situation where it's gonna be difficult, but I think you make a good point about best player available because some of these teams may pass up on guys who the Knicks may not have considered if they would have had a higher spot, but given where they are, it may make sense to take them. Other needs, of course, outside shooting. Knicks were, I think, dead last in made 3-pointers last year. They were bottom 4 or 5 in 3-point percentage. Shot creating also an issue for the team. Not a lot of one-on-one isolation options, and they were really poor defensively on the wings, particularly. Barrett and Knox, not necessarily great defenders at this point in their careers. They can improve that spot, and that's going to be important as well. And they need some depth at the 5. Mitchell Robinson has been a guy who gets in a lot of foul trouble, and they really, as the joke went, they had a lot of, kind of 4 men playing the 5 last year. They probably want to get someone who can actually play that position. Whether or not all those needs are filled in this draft, they have 3 picks, so they maybe do a great deal. But some of that stuff is going to have to be addressed in free agency. So, Kendall, when it comes to targets for the Knicks in this upcoming draft, what are you looking at, given those team needs and given the situation they have coming into this offseason?
All right, so look, if I'm the Knicks, the first thing I do is I get on the phone with Gerson Rosas in Minnesota. I get on the phone with Bob Myers in Golden State. I get on the phone with Michael Jordan and Mitch Kupchak and say, can we get into the top 3? Because look, let's be honest. I think the Knicks were one of the teams that got screwed over. We talked about in our lottery recap. They're not completely done. Like there are still good options at 8, but I think for me the biggest team needs for the Knicks, like you broke it down, are backcourt guys that can get their own shot and can score from the perimeter and can be a lead guard. I think that there are guys at the top of the draft that I look at and I say, obviously you mentioned LaMelo Ball, obviously could be a lead guard that can create for other guys, can create his own shot. I'm a little worried about his outside shooting ability, and he's not my favorite prospect in this draft, but obviously they're a great fit with the Knicks and the New York market and creating energy and buzz around the franchise. And also Anthony Edwards. I love Anthony Edwards. I think he's a guy that I would draft number 1 if I were the Knicks, because he gives you that scoring punch that I think the Knicks desperately need. But if you're talking about a situation where you can't get up to 8, and I'd be willing to give up Frank and Knox and the draft picks that they have this year to move up into the top 3 if you can. But if those teams are not aren't high on that package and you have to stay at 8, to me, I think you got to hope that either one of Denny Avdia or Killian Hayes falls. I would right now I would focus on Denny Avdia because look, I think he doesn't provide you necessarily the scoring that you would maybe hope from a guy that you're drafting. He's not going to give you 18 points a game like Anthony Edwards might next season, but he's a guy that right away is one of the most mature players in this draft, helps you on both sides of the floor. You mentioned having a wing defender, and Denny Avdia can do that. You mentioned a guy that can give you outside shooting. Certainly, the Denny Avdia that we saw post-pandemic in the Israeli league showed a guy that can really space the floor a little bit. And you feel like if he continues to work on that, by the time we play next season, he could be a real floor spacer for you. And he also gives you the playmaking ability that a point guard would. So that's the guy I would look at if I were the New York Knicks. And I mean, if you can get someone like Denny Avdia, I would pair him with another backcourt guy like Jamias Ramsey at 27, kid out of Texas Tech, who I think I don't want to say he's been underrated, but I think he's a guy that we've seen countless years. Guys like Lou Dort this season with OKC, guys that are two-way pit bulls that maybe offensively are lacking in some areas and need some development and some refinement, but from day one are going to be able to make their mark on the defensive end. So I think he would be a good fit with this Knicks roster because I think they need some toughness. I think they need some dog. And I think you add a guy like Avdia who gives you a high talent and a high skill level. You pair him with a guy like Ramsey, who is one of the better two-way prospects in this draft. A lot of people talking about the two-way prospects at the top for the Knicks, Devin Vassell Aaron Nesmith and Isaac Okoro. But I think if you don't get that guy at the top of the draft, there are certainly some guys at the back end of the first round that you could look at. And I think Jamias Ramsey would be a guy that I think would fit well with the Knicks.
It's funny because we've seen someone like our boy Jonathan Macri, shout out to him, talk about a player like Marcus Smart would fitting very well for the Knicks if they could find a way to do a deal. Ramsey to me does have a lot of similarities with Marcus Smart, so I certainly see that as an option. And you mentioned Dog, and I totally agree. I think the Knicks have absolutely lacked a lot of toughness in a lot of these years where they've struggled recently. So when I'm looking at targeting players, look, I know I talked about shooting. I know I talked about point guard. And unfortunately, I don't know if they'll get that considering where they're drafting. Because I just feel like if Hayes or Halliburton go ahead of, they go at 7 to Detroit, or if one of those other teams takes a flyer on them early than we expect, and I think the Knicks may be in a tough spot to find that player. So I'm going with a guy like Isaac Okoro as a guy that I would target if I'm the New York Knicks. You mentioned Dog, this guy has it. You mentioned toughness, this guy has it. And I just think that he pairs very well with RJ Barrett. RJ being more of a one-on-one, leads the ball in his hand kind of player in order to be successful. Okoro is the opposite. Okoro moves well without the ball. Okoro will get kind of quote-unquote garbage points. Okoro runs the floor extremely well. And for the difficulty that RJ has defensively, Okoro is an excellent defensive player, one of the better defensive players in this draft on the perimeter, maybe besides the kid from Florida State, Vassell. So to me, he's a guy I really like for this team. I think that he matches the temperament of Tom Thibodeau, which I think is super important. And I think his versatility will be very important as well, given that this is a team that could use some more ball handling. He's a very good ball handler for a guy his size playing the three. Again, I've deleted a video where I said he kind of reminds me a little bit of Andre Iguodala in some instances, or Latrell Sprewell in some instances. Both guys had lead ball capabilities. So he's a guy I would look at. If they find a way to get the point guard that they want at 8, I think that someone like Killian Hayes would be the pick for me. I know French point guards, while we all love Frank, didn't necessarily go great the last time, considering some of the players that were still on the board. But I just think Killian Hayes is a stud, which is why I have doubts that he'll stick. I think that there's a very good chance, and when I say stick, I mean stick in the draft lottery. I think that he may go a lot earlier than people expect. Yeah, I think that once people start doing their work on him, it's going to be tough for me to see him slide.
Detroit at 7 feels like his floor early. Like, I think the Knicks obviously would also snatch him up, but I don't know if Detroit's passing on Killian Hayes. But we'll talk about Detroit later.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to be the question. Detroit, to me, looks like the team that potentially is where the next crop of point guards starts, and that's, again, bad news for the Knicks considering they need a point guard badly. And do you trade up a couple of spots to get ahead of Detroit potentially to make sure you get Killian Hayes, or if they like Halliburton to get Tyrese Halliburton? That's going to be a conversation that Leon Rose and the team.
How do you feel about the fit of Tyrese Halliburton with the Knicks? Because to me, I know a lot of Knicks fans are high on Halliburton, but I'm just a little concerned with his lack of scoring ability. And I think with a team that is, and also the Knicks' lack of weapons. I think we're talking about a guy who's a very high-level creator in terms of creating plays for teammates, but not a guy who can really create plays for himself as well. I'd be a little concerned with him playing on a team that's not as great. And we saw even at Iowa State, he was effective, but they couldn't win games because, even though he's their best player and he's one of the best players in the country, he's not a guy that's going to dominate with not a lot of talent around him. So I don't know if the fit with Halliburton, I like Halliburton, but I don't know if, and I understand why Knicks fans like him, but I don't know if the fit with the Knicks is as good as it would be with, say, the Phoenix Suns, which we'll talk about obviously also.
Yeah, that's a good point with Halliburton in terms of fit. I think that some Knicks fans are excited about him because of his ability to shoot. And I think that while, yes, he's not, I don't think we look at him as a big-time scorer. I think the fact that you hope that his shooting ability can translate, he can space the floor and create lanes for RJ and for, Julius Randle when he's not spinning into double teams and he can actually pick his head up and look and survey the defense. So I see the fit, and I also see the excitement as well, given his defensive prowess and his defensive potential. But I do get that, at that point guard position they need a scorer, and that's kind of why again I like Hayes maybe a little bit more.
What about your boy Obi Toppin? I know you're a big Obi.
I don't think Obi Toppin's gonna if he was there I would snag him up, but I just don't think that there's any way he's gonna be at 8. I think that there are too many teams that don't need a point guard that are gonna look big, and I can't see, besides Wiseman and Big O from USC, I can't see how he sticks, how he stays on the board. I think that's highly unlikely. And I think Avdia is highly unlikely. I know you mentioned Denny. I love Denny, and I think he would also be a great fit for the Knicks. But I don't see him being there at 8. So that's why I think you're looking at some secondary options.
I feel like one of those guys will. Whether it's Hayes, Toppin, or Avdia, I feel like one of those three, or Okoro. Because Okoro is a guy that I feel like Atlanta would be, may feel like the spot for Okoro. And if he doesn't go to Atlanta, I think he could end up past 8, or 2-8. But, that would be a concern to me. But one of those guys is going to fall, which is why the Knicks are in a good spot, which is why we talked about in our lottery recap. They just got to hope one of those teams drafts Big O, because that's not the guy you want. If Big O goes to Cleveland, or if Big O goes to Atlanta, now you're talking about one of those guys is definitely going to be an option for the Knicks. Of those point guards later in the draft that you would look at, let's say you do draft a wing later, who is a guy that you would like at 27?
Yeah, so I want to talk about
Kyra Lewis is a guy that a lot of Knicks fans are high on. I'm a little shakier on Kyra Lewis. I think he might be there, but I think Kyra Lewis is going to be a good Darren Collison-like point guard. But I don't know which at 27 is great. But
yeah, I mean, speed kills. So Kyra Lewis is intriguing because you see how fast this game is becoming. The guys who can just and the guys who can just get into the paint nonstop seem to be the toughest guys to handle, the toughest teams to handle. So I get the appeal of Kyra Lewis. I have questions about his finishing ability for a guy who is his thing is getting into the paint. He takes a lot of weird shots when he gets there. If there's any defense,
like shied away from contact,
right? And John Morant didn't have a plan once he got to the paint. And I'm not saying you can't coach that up. You absolutely can, but sometimes guys never figure that out. So So that's
talking about a rookie point guard. I don't know if he's ready to play right away.
Yeah, so that concerns me a little bit with Kyra. He can go. I can see him coming out of the gate and really impressing, and because his speed is just so devastating. I could also see it going the other way, where he's not nearly as advanced as people think, and maybe he takes a little time. I don't know if this guy's gonna be there, but I think Tyrell Terry would make the most sense for the Knicks if you can't get a point guard at 8, because Terry.
Yeah, I would love if you were the Knicks.
Yeah, because I think Terry. That's where you get not only your point guard, but also the shooting aspect. And look, I know he's a young player. I know there are questions about athleticism, questions about explosiveness. I had a conversation, with our dad about him, and to me, it's just one of those things where, of course, players like Steph Curry, the reason why Tyrell Terry is getting looks in the first round, but you can't predict or can't quantify, what is Tyrell Terry's craftiness against NBA defense. I just don't know. Right. I've seen him do it in college, and he was very impressive in college, but there are a lot of players like him who were unable to, because to me, Terry scores a lot off of craftiness. He's a very, very smart player. He knows how to get his shot off. He works well off the ball. He uses pump fakes extremely well. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to do that against NBA players, because he's never going to be able to beat guys just off of pure speed, off of pure athleticism, off of pure length. And Steph is an elite, god level craftiness scorer. Even someone like Seth Curry has great craftiness as a scorer, and even he's a role player. So, does Terry have that? I don't know, but I would take the chance on him.
Look, if Terry is available at 27, you run to the green room. I don't know. There's probably gonna be virtual drafts, so you run to. You're in New York. You run to the league offices. You bring in the card anyway.
Yeah, put your mask on. Put your mask on. Put your gloves on.
Yeah,
social distance for everybody. Yeah,
Terry would be a great fit. Would you be willing to draft him at 8? If I told you by the time you get closer to the draft, he's a lottery guy.
No.
Do you? No.
No, you gotta trade down. No, you got to trade down. If you talk, if he climbs, and maybe talking later in the lottery, and you can get more assets and more picks, I could see that. I don't. You cannot draft him at 8. I think there are players that will be bigger impacts at 8, even in a weaker draft than Terry will be. I think Terry's like, again, a Seth Curry type. I think that's the kind of player you kind of look at with him. And I wouldn't draft that guy at 8. I think there are going to be better players. One last guy I think I would consider too, because I did mention front court depth, and one of the players Knicks fans talked about a bunch of always wanting to have is a guy who's like a Montrezl Harrell type as well. I think the closest guy to that is Isaiah Stewart. I think there's a chance he could be available at 27. Very physical. I know he's a little undersized, and with the Knicks we see all these power forwards. You maybe say, here you go again. But Isaiah Stewart can actually hold his own as a center. He has a 7'4", 7'5" wingspan. He brings some ring protection, and the guy is just a beast in the paint. And the Knicks, they were a very good rebounding team last year, and you do have a guy like Julius Randle who also kind of plays similar. But I think he couldn't hurt to have a guy again bringing some nastiness, bringing some toughness. He's a boom or bust. He's a boom or bust player because of the undersized aspect of him, and there's no real shooting ability that we've seen. But I think if you're just talking about Montrezl Harrell type, I would look at Isaiah Stewart.
We haven't done a comparison video with Isaiah Stewart, but I implore people to watch Elton Brand at Duke and then watch Isaiah Stewart at Washington. Both guys also from Western New York, upstate New York. You'll be like, wow, Elton Brand was the number 1 pick, and Isaiah Stewart doing the exact same stuff. We're talking about going late in the first round. I mean, it's pretty wild. Look, it's a different time. So, obviously, like, Isaiah Stewart, Elton Brand may not be a number 1 pick in today's NBA, but if he went to Duke rather than Washington, and obviously you could bring up Vernon Carey also went to Duke, and he's not going to go in the first round, or in the lottery, but I'm just saying, like, if you like Elton Brand, I think you like Isaiah Stewart. So, yeah, I mean, I think any of those teams at the back end of the first round, if they need a big, Isaiah Stewart's a guy I would look at. Top 5 player coming out of high school. Mm-hmm. Great player at Washington. The team didn't really win, but he didn't have much help. I think, you're going to get a guy as a contributor in the NBA. So I think he'd be a great fit. And then, like you said, local. Local New York guy, I think that would be an awesome fit for the New York Knicks.
What do you guys think the New York Knicks should do in this upcoming draft? Make sure you guys leave a comment. What would you be looking at? What should they do at 8? What should they do at 27? What should they do in the second round even? I know they're picking number 38 in that aspect. Make sure you, again, give us a comment. Let us know what you guys think. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like the video if you did. And subscribe to the channel, New Generation Media. You have plenty of these videos coming out. Virtual NBA Draft War Room is a project we've really been talking about, fighting over even of how to put it out and make it work. So we're really excited to get it going. Starting it with the New York Knicks makes the most sense, and we're happy to get it going again. So thank you guys so much for watching. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.